So this is the Motorola G51, basically a bigger brother to the Motorola G31. However, is it as compelling as the G31 or is it just a size increase and not much more? Let's jump into the video and talk about the Motorola G51.
Before we continue with my opinion, let's look at some facts. The specifications. The Motorola G51 5G comes with a 6.8-inch LCD panel with a refresh rate of 120Hz. And of course, it's a full HD Plus resolution. It comes out of the box with Android 11, and in terms of CPU, it has the Snapdragon 480 Plus 5G, which realistically isn't going to blow you away. Then in terms of memory, there are plenty of options. It starts with 64GB and 4GB of RAM, up to 128GB of memory and 8GB of RAM. My version, however, is the one with 4GB of RAM and 128GB of memory. And if I want to extend that memory, then yes, of course I can via the micro SD card. For the camera setup, we have a main 50MP sensor with a 1.8 aperture and a sensor size of 1/2.76 inches. An 8MP ultra wide that has an aperture of 2.2 and of course 118 degrees field of view with a sensor size of 1/4 inches. And then of course we have a third one, but let's just simply ignore that. In terms of video recording, there is a limit up to 1080p and 240 frames per second. And for my version, the front facing camera is a 13MP one. Now what also truly pleases me that of course it comes with some water repellent, but no official IP rating. But still, it's nice to see that that is built in for the price. And of course we get a lovely 3.5mm headphone jack for better audio experience. In terms of battery, we get a 5000 mAh battery inside, and of course a charger is included with the box itself. Granted, it's only 10 watts, so it will take its sweet ass time to charge up. And in terms of the fingerprint scanner, it is mounted on the side. So let's just straight away dive into the simple question about who this device is for, because realistically, with it being around $200, with some sites of course selling it around $220 as well, it isn't the most powerful one and the best on the market for the price to performance. With that being said, there is a market without a doubt for phones like this. In my experience, I truly enjoy a lot of things about Motorola. For instance, the cleaner software experience, and it really doesn't have any issues apart from screenshots and of course closing all apps at once not being a thing still. Well, it is, but you have to slide far to the left to do so. The biggest thing for this one is battery life. This phone does not ever have an issue with making it till the end of the day, and simply I don't have to worry about it. I can even make it 2 days depending on use of course here. And then there are some really handy features here as well. Shaking the phone for instance turns off that flashlight. That might seem just a funny feature, but I find that I use it plenty of times and it works really well. The same goes for the camera. Just swish it around in your hand with it facing down and the camera turns on. And while we're on the subject of the camera, let's talk about that one. The result is pretty average, with it looking more contrasty than I would like it to be, but overall the main camera and the results are solid enough. There isn't really a modern phone where I feel like in daytime it will struggle a lot. They are simply doing well enough for the price that you are paying. Again though, it's not the best in class. There are better options out there if you want the best camera for the price, however it does come at some sacrifice of course with some other areas. And of course we have an 8MP ultra wide. Now, like every phone I've tested around this price, this setup isn't impressive. Images are often too soft and it doesn't have a lot of details like the main sensor does. But again, no surprise, this counts for a lot of phones around this price. And then we have of course a 2MP macro sensor. So let's have a conversation about audio. To no surprise, sadly it doesn't come with dual speakers, so yes, it does mean that you only have a bottom facing speaker for that audio. And while the audio gets plenty loud, it is far easier to block while you are playing a game or watching a video. Therefore I hope to see that in the future Motorola moves past this and of course has dual speakers. It's far nicer to have. At the end, I don't think that the Motorola G51 5G is going to be the best value for the price, because realistically it isn't. But the device still has its purpose. If you want to, for instance, have 5G, and of course have great battery life, some water repellent, and the basics being covered well in the shape of course having a micro SD slot and of course a lovely 3.5mm headphone jack, then yeah, there is definitely a use to the Motorola G51 5G. And while the CPU isn't very impressive, with normal day-to-day use, it definitely doesn't struggle. With that being said, if you do want to play intense graphic games, yeah, then this phone isn't for you. And if you want to have the best images for the price, again, this isn't for you. But overall, for the price that you are paying, there are definitely some plus points that really matter depending on what you want from a phone. Again, it really depends on the user on whether this is a phone for you or not. So I hope this video helps you out deciding that.
So at the end, would I recommend the Motorola G51? Well, there's a lot of things to like. I think it depends on what person you are. If you want a clean software experience and good battery life, Motorola does that pretty well. There are some things, as stated, where I think Motorola can improve upon when it comes to software experience, like of course the screenshots and of course having all the apps that you just want to close all at once. But overall, I have to say, if you want a clean experience, great battery life and overall just good experience in day-to-day life with more normal use, I would say Motorola does a really good job. And honestly, I would say if you want a smaller phone, for instance, Motorola G31 might actually be a better sale than this. It has great battery life as well because it has a 5000 mAh battery inside. But for that one, I would definitely recommend checking out that review. But if you want the best camera for the price, I don't think, for instance, Motorola is it. I think the camera is fine, but nothing to write home about. Either way, hope you enjoyed this full review of the Motorola G51 5G. And of course, if you aren't subscribed yet, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like and leave a comment below. Either way, have a good one and talk to you guys in the next.